Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Oscar Piastri wins his third Grand Prix in a row. He had help from Max Verstappen and Lando Norris today with massive drama at the first very part of the race, but the second half of the race, that belongs to Ferrari. Massive drama between Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton and the team behind the scenes in terms of what they were doing today with their decision making to allow it to end like this. In the end, they nearly got the worst of both worlds, and neither of their drivers are happy at all about basically anything, not just the decisions on track, but also the fact they were scrapping hard for P7, P8. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Hamilton not happy, Leclerc not happy. We've got plenty to get into. We thought there might be some rain today. It looked possible. They teased it at a time. There was a good chance as well that towards the end of the race there was going to be some rain as well. Eventually, the Miami weather did not comply with that, and we ended up getting a dry race pretty much from start to finish. Before we get to the race, I did want to mention a couple of interesting comments here because the political game is continuing. Andrea Stella said before the race today that Red Bull exploit every possible opportunity to stay in the competition, and some of these opportunities is to create the narrative that we are making miracles here, others should win every single practice session and qualifying in a race. Look, I get what he's saying, but we've also got to recognise that while yes, Red Bull may be exceptionally good at controlling the narrative, the McLaren car today was absolutely indomitable. No one was beating it unless, you know, DNF, technical related or whatever, right? Or a crash. It was honestly evidence from the first 3 laps that the McLaren was a rocket ship today. And we saw that play out during the course of the Grand Prix, even though Lando probably would have won. Potentially would have won, if not for the first lap incident that we will get into. Even Zach Brown went as far to say that Red Bull are trying to question the legality and destabilise us with these accusations. Well, I'm sure discuss that over the coming days as well. There was this whole Lego cars, and I'm sure that Lewis Hamilton might be looking at his Ferrari and saying there might be some ideas on that machine that we can actually use. But let's get into the Grand Prix because it was a big one. There was lots of things that happened during this, and this was the first corner. Lando gets a solid start. Max locks up into turn 1 and actually goes a bit wide. That means that Lando has the opportunity to get the switch back here. And it's a tough situation for Lando because Lando has a good chance with better traction here to actually take the lead of the Grand Prix at this point. But, I mean, it's Max Verstappen, and Max Verstappen is not going to let anything at all be easy. So Max and Lando get pretty much equal traction out of this first corner. They go into turn 2 together, Max gets a snap, and Lando just is forced to yield off the track. From a guidelines perspective, I mean, look, it's Max Verstappen being Max Verstappen, but technically it's fair racing, and it's super tough for Lando because, I mean, what are you meant to do? If you're Lando, do you go for it? The thing is, if you go for it, you know Max is pushing you off the track, which is what he did. But if you don't go for it, you let Max know that you're a pushover. And also, you know, you never want to yield as a driver. It is what it is. But unfortunately for Lando, by yielding, he put himself down into 6th. And that effectively spelt the end of his race. Now, honestly, it kind of didn't because Verstappen and Norris or Piastri also battled later on, which put Norris back in the equation. But then his battle with Verstappen, that was the real difference maker. So it was super aggressive for Max. And it's interesting really because Lando was behind in the championship compared to Oscar. That is certainly true as a result of today. And, well, it's interesting for Max because last year he was fighting Lando in the championship, he was leading the championship, and let's say like Mexico, he could simply decide that, okay, I will drive Lando off the road, I won't get any points, he won't get any points, that's great for me. But this year, he can't afford to be too aggressive with Lando or too aggressive with Piastri on some level because if he sabotages his own race to thwart one of his competitors, the other guy gets a load of points, which also doesn't help him, right? So that's the predicament that Max Verstappen currently finds himself in, but it was all kinds of drama. The first corner, Lawson and Doohan came together. Doohan was then out of the race. Lawson eventually retired with some damage later on in the Grand Prix as well. As Lando says, what am I meant to do? Drive into the wall? So it was tough for Lando, but honestly, he did a really good job making his way back through the field very swiftly, because I thought that he might struggle to do that, but he honestly made really light work of the competition. His overtake on Russell was mega. I thought, there's no way he's going to overtake here, but on lap 7, it was evident that that McLaren was otherworldly. Like, the fact that Lando could even make that overtake in the first sector was just outrageous. I couldn't believe my eyes when he had so much more grip there. it was like he was driving a different Formula Series. And honestly, Russell must have been mind blown, thinking, how the hell did he come down the inside of me there? Like, what is this guy driving? That was my perception anyway. So Norris gets the position. Of course, he gets Antonelli shortly afterwards as well. And then we get the battles at the front. So Max was leading, but Oscar was putting the pressure on. It was a great battle, really. Max defended well. Oscar attacked well. You know, it was good attack and defense, I thought, from both parties. And it was perfect for Lando, right? Because it put Lando right back into the mix. Eventually, though, I mean, I think that Max... Again, could he have yielded? There was a moment here into turn 1 where Oscar had the DRS, he was ahead, and Lando, or not Lando, we'll see that in a second, Max decided that he was just going to go super late on the brakes. It was kind of the classic Max, you know, brake really late, try get to the apex first, and I think he was getting a bit desperate, really. He probably should have just yielded the position, to be honest, but he locked his tyres, went off the track. Piastri managed it well to take the position, because we've seen in situations like this before where Max will just go for this mega dive bomb down the inside, never making the corner, and the other driver tries to hang it around the outside. Piastri was wise enough and said, okay, if Max is trying to brake late here, I'm just going to hit the switch back. That's what he did. He got the position. Lando wasn't quite as... I don't want to say lucky, right? But at this point in the race, Verstappen's tyres were dropping off big time, and Norris made that big dive bomb down into the end of turn 11, went off the track, had to give the position back to Max, got it back again, couldn't get it to stick, and again, Norris's racecraft, in terms of him being clinical when it comes to making these overtakes stick, that let him down, because to be honest, if Norris got past Verstappen cleanly today, it seemed like he had more pace. Now, Piastri was probably managing, Norris was probably pushing harder, but it does still feel like, to me, that Lando, in clean air, with everything going his way, is still the faster driver of McLaren. He's just not the stronger driver, in my opinion, right? Like, as I've said, that I'll still stand by this opinion until proven otherwise, that I think Lando is quicker, fundamentally, but he's not better right now, for various reasons. Antonelli, Russell, Albon, Sainz, Leclerc, Tsunoda, Ocon, Hamilton. Hamilton eventually got past Ocon after battling behind the Haas for a very, very long time indeed. He did eventually get the move done. And, you know, then we had Norris 8.5 seconds back. Max was dropping like a stone. But to be honest, he wasn't dropping like a stone. It was just the McLarens were in a completely different planet. And they were lapping like a second a lap quicker than everybody else. And as people are saying in the replies, you know, still playing this underdog card. Good luck with that one after today. Now, let's transition into what was going on at Ferrari, because it was a disaster for Ferrari today, not just for Ferrari Scuderia Formula 1 team, but for their engines, because Bortoleto and Behrman both had disasters. And Hamilton's on the radio saying, look, Mr. Riccardo Adami, right? I'm in a battle right now. I'm like fighting for my life out here. Stop talking to me in the braking zone. Like, what are you playing at? So that was a major complaint, and for good reason. Charles Leclerc was on the radio getting told that it was a poor turn 7 he had, and he was like, look, brother, everything is poor. Like, what are we doing here? This car is terrible. This then is Behrman's Ferrari engine just explodes and he's out of the race, and that means we got a VSC. Would have kind of loved a real safety car, but you know, whatever. Technically a VSC was fine, so I'm not going to complain too much, but it would have been spicy. And it came at an interesting time because, you know, I mean, look at this. They were kind of semi-expecting rain, so we had drivers on mediums. Again, questions for Pirelli, I'm not going to lie. I mean, we've got medium compounds, easily lasting 30 odd laps out of 57. We're talking about trying to do 2 stops, and the 1 stop is just so easy, it's a joke. I mean, yeah, there's lots of questions about that right now, I'm not going to lie. But Piastri was way ahead. But the VSC comes out, and it gave the opportunity for lots of drivers to capitalise. Hamilton really took good advantage of this. He was in a perfect position, could slap the medium tyres on, and then be quick to the end of the Grand Prix. Certainly for the next 10 laps, he was going to be rapid. And that was the big talking point, really, at Ferrari. All of the guys, though, do come into the pits. Verstappen pretty much lost out on this because Russell took the advantage, having started on the mediums, put the hard tyres on, and Russell ended up ahead of Max. That was a particularly big deal. And then the pit stop phase concludes. Hamilton is absolutely flying on the fresh mediums. And this is when the second stint of the race with the drama really comes into play at Ferrari. So Leclerc does well, gets a move done on Sainz. It honestly looked like it was going to be a through goes Hamilton moment where he ended up getting the position as well. But no, Leclerc did well, got on the traction, defended well. And then it became really interesting between the two Ferraris because Leclerc was quick. Leclerc was definitely quick at this point in the race, but the medium tyre was the tyre to be on. Antonelli was struggling even behind the Williams of Albon. So, I think Russell did a great job again today, managing to just secure a P3 out of nowhere. Albon, again, sensational work from him. I mean, he was P4 yesterday before the penalty. P5 today. Unbelievable scenes from the Williams man. Just great to see the revival of that team, but not what Ferrari want to see. So Antonelli was a target. He was gettable, right? He'd had a tricky middle stint. His tyre deg still isn't as good as his teammate. So, it was possible that Ferrari could have got him. Now, Ferrari had an interesting decision to make here because Hamilton, could he have got past on pure pace? Maybe if he'd have really gone for it, used all his energy and burned up all his tyres like he was fighting another driver, sure, but you're not going to do that against your own teammate. You're not going to take all that risk. So Hamilton's sitting in the dirty air of Leclerc, right behind him, right in his DRS, saying, look, guys, are you going to let me go or not? I'm on the faster tyres right now. I can catch Antonelli ahead. Let me go. And he was like, look, you're going to want me to sit here the whole race? Now, Ferrari, let's say they very much hesitated on this. I think the reason why they hesitated to some degree was because Sainz was potentially a threat. Albon was fast. They were potentially fearful that if they let Hamilton go, Leclerc would be a sitting duck for Sainz. So instead they thought, well, maybe we'll just hold on to P7, P8. And it's like, wow, a Ferrari really at a point where they're like, well, I guess we should just consolidate this P7, P8 finish. Is that how bad it's got? That's what the decision is at this point. So, Hamilton was on the radio because they told him we want to keep the DRS to Charles, which tells me they were trying to defend from Sainz rather than thinking attackingly on Antonelli, which was a joke, I thought. I think it was pretty clear what they should have done here. Let Hamilton go immediately, because he was clearly the faster driver at that particular time in the Grand Prix. And if Hamilton can't get Antonelli, you can swap the guys back at the end. I know you're obviously risking that Sainz gets Leclerc, but look, if Sainz gets Leclerc in a Williams, then that's on you, building a terrible car, as far as I'm concerned. You've got to play attacking stuff. You don't play attacking, in the strategy department. You're just always going to lose if you keep trying to be too defensive. Hamilton says, this ain't good teamwork, guys. What are you playing at? He even said more on the radio as well, before eventually they did call him to swap the tyres or, swap the cars. But this came probably 3 or 4 laps too late, by which time those medium tyres that are significantly more prone to degradation and, they're softer fundamentally, so they're going to have a harder time in these situations. He managed to burn those up, really, behind Leclerc. So all of a sudden, his pace that was there a few laps earlier certainly wasn't as strong as it could have been. Now, he did catch up to Antonelli, slowly but surely, but as he said on the radio, look, I've used all my tyres up now, guys. You've kept me behind Leclerc for 4 laps in his DRS. Now my medium tyres are not the same medium tyres they were 4 laps ago when I was flying through the field. And then Leclerc's on the radio saying, look, now I'm the one in dirty air behind Hamilton, which is true. And they eventually swapped them back again, which, was probably the correct decision the second time around. But an absolute shambles, really, because if they'd have let Hamilton go immediately, I think he'd have had a great chance getting Antonelli. And if it didn't happen, then, they were probably in position to still swap him around again if they wanted to, right? And of course, Hamilton benefited from the virtual safety car to put him in into this position, but it's not like Leclerc was having a good time further up the field either. So then they make the decision, they swap them around again towards the end of the Grand Prix. And even then, Hamilton was staying very close. But at that point in the race, Hamilton's tyres are pretty much cooked. And he was having to hold off Sainz for his life on the final lap. And we'll see that in a second. And so, look, Hamilton was very vocal on the radio about his disapproval of the Ferrari decisions here. And I'm sure that when radio messages like this happen, often it's a combination of factors. I think the fundamental factor is that they're fighting for P7, P8, stuck behind a Williams and his old teammates in Mercedes, rather than doing anything properly to challenge for even a podium, right? So that's fundamentally where the frustration comes from. But then you've got Sainz 1.4 behind and Hamilton saying, you want to let him pass as well? You want me to let him pass as well? Is that what you're trying to say? That's sarcastic. That's, heavily critical of the team. The other drama here was that they told Charles that, okay, we're going to swap the cars again. Lewis is going to let you back through. But they didn't tell Lewis in time. So Charles was like, oh, Hamilton's defying the orders. But actually, no, he hadn't. He was just told, okay, swap at turn 11 later than Charles was informed that they were going to do it. So, even on the communication side, it was an absolute mess. Hamilton even mentions a little bit earlier, right, when they eventually did decide to make the swap, that back in China, where he didn't have the pace that Leclerc had, he was happy to get out the way and allow Leclerc to go on with his race. And his radio engineer says, okay, yeah, we're going to swap the cars. And says after that, have a tea break while you're at it. Come on, trying to say, look, I've been here for 3 laps. What are you guys playing at, right? You got a whole team of lads over there. What are you doing, right? Go for a tea break, have an espresso maybe. Like, I don't know what those guys need right now. Because, this was probably the big quote of the day, really, was Hamilton calling out his team to have a tea break mid-radio. And look, in the end, it didn't help them, right? I mean, Leclerc eventually is allowed back through. Hamilton was right on his tail. Leclerc was closing on Antonelli. And look, maybe if Hamilton... It's so difficult to decide what they could have done differently here after they'd wasted time, because once Hamilton was ahead, it was quite clear that actually, no, Leclerc is now faster because the hard tyres have become stronger again. So maybe Leclerc should have been let go earlier, but then Hamilton would have really been at the mercy of Sainz properly in that position. So, I mean, who really knows? It's just an absolute joke. The other drama was Tsunoda got a 5-second penalty for spinning in the pit lane, and he needed to keep a 5-second gap to Hadjar, which he did by 0.1 of a second, which is pretty mega. But look at the front of the field. Norris was closing in on Piastri by a pretty serious rate of knots, but in the end it was pretty comfortable, I think, for Oscar in the end. Norris could have won, should have won, whatever you want to say, if not for what happened at the first couple of corners. Verstappen couldn't get past Russell. In the end, Russell finishes P3, but just so far behind. Albon in the Williams in P5. Then Antonelli. Leclerc gave it a go, but it wasn't good enough. And Hamilton and Sainz had a massive instant at the final corner. Sainz went for a crazy dive bomb, to be honest. Like, it was a pretty insane dive bomb. Made contact, they got out of there alive, and they get over the line just in time to finish the Grand Prix. But, the radio afterwards with Leclerc, radio silence. The radio afterwards with Hamilton, radio silence. Norris had a couple of words to say on the Max Verstappen incident, saying that obviously it's always going to get narrow there, especially with Max. What can I say? If I don't go for it, people complain. If I go for it, people complain. You can't win. But that is the way that it is with Max. It's crash or don't pass. So, look... Lando's saying it how he appears it to be in his mind, and obviously emotions are running high after the Grand Prix. But even have a look at this, right? This is Lando Norris after the Turn 1 incident. This was actually not the first lap, but this is another incident, right, when he tried to go around the outside and was given no room at all. I mean, look, this is how it is. Max drives in a way that is... I mean, it's very hard racing. It's very, very hard racing. I mean, we saw some great racing between Ocon and Hamilton, right, when they went side by side through Turn 11. Like, if that was Max in either one of those cars, Ocon or Hamilton, the other driver is not getting, given that racing room, as it were. And look, whether you think that's fair or not, that's a debate. This is how Verstappen drives. You may think it's over the line. You may think it's hard but fair, right? Like, it is what it is as far as I'm concerned. Norris knows what he's getting himself into, but when you put yourself in this position around the outside of Max, like, you know that Max is making you go over this curb. Like, you just know that Max is not giving you the inside line. So he had no choice but to back out of it, smash his floor over the curb, and then as he went around the second corner, look at this, he puts his middle finger up at Max. Look at that. So, quite the comment really there from Lando mid-race. Eventually he got the move done, and this is Charles Leclerc and Lewis after the Grand Prix kind of, I'm sure Hamilton was saying to Charles, damn, like, how have you survived at this team this long? Because what an absolute shambles. So, Hamilton, through to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.